You're listening to The Observing Eye. Pirate Radio for the mind. Coming at you fresh from the computer hell cabin.
Hello, you beautiful lot. It's Friday, the 27th of October, 2023, and this is episode 36 of The Observing Eye, coming at you live from the computer hell cabin. If you're new, welcome aboard, and if you're returning, welcome back. As always, I like to begin these episodes with a brief moment of reflection, so let's take a moment to contemplate the good things that have happened this week. And now a moment for the not so good. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about identity. I've been thinking a lot about this week for some reason. And I've been contemplating, what is it that defines who I am? What is it that I use as a construct to define myself? Who am I as projected out into the world? And what makes me, me? Personally, I feel that identity starts with the idea of labels, but it's a very complex and very multi-layered construct. And it's important to recognize that our identity is continually evolving. Who I am today is not who I was yesterday, nor will I be the same man tomorrow. That is something that I have to try and bear in mind sometimes. And it's tricky, isn't it? Because we come from this space of the observer, and the observer can't really observe itself. So we don't necessarily know or see or become aware of the changes in our identity over time and the impact that has on all sorts of behaviors and traits and responses and perspectives that we hold. I want to start by just throwing a little metaphor out there so we can really get our heads around the idea of identity. So I'd like you to imagine, I'm going to invite you to imagine that your identity is like a mosaic floor from like the old Roman villas. And each tile on that mosaic forms a grand picture. We have to consider that each tile is a representation of a facet of who we are or who we believe ourselves to be. So some of these tiles are going to be inherited. So they're going to come from birth, from us being born into the world. And those things are going to be nationality, culture, ethnicity, physical appearance, those external aspects of our identity. Then there are going to be other tiles that are put into the mosaic that come from our upbringing. And those are going to be our belief systems, our moral compass, our values. A lot of these are going to be inherited from our parents, our friends, our family, our school. All of these things they're going to create like a gestalt of concepts and ideas that are going to go towards forming what is essentially our cultural identity. And then, of course, there's going to be a couple that we add ourselves. And the ones we add ourselves, they're going to come from our personal experiences as we grow. They're going to come from what we experience in our relationships. They're going to come from the choices that we make and the outcome of those choices. But as I was alluding to earlier, this mosaic picture that we've got on the floor, it's not static. As we go through life, some of those tiles are going to change. Some of those tiles are going to get completely replaced. And new tiles are going to be continually added to the image. So imagine you've got this constantly changing, shifting image over time. And that shifting image is you. That's your identity. There might have been a point in your life when you were a devout believer in something. And then your viewpoint changes as you grow. So like your political ideology, for example, you may have been left when you were younger and you may sort of lean more towards the right as you get older. This is how the mosaic shifts. It's a fluidity of identity. Although it's an image, we imagine it as these mosaic tiles. It's not carved in stone. We have to consider our identity not as like a sculpture that is rigid and fixed and unchanging, but more of a river. So it's continually flowing, continually reshaping itself, which means that we, over time, without realizing it, are constantly changing. Now, going back to what I mentioned labels earlier, and labels in identity, and how we define ourselves to the external world, we very, very often lean into a label to describe who we are. So you go to a party and you meet someone, and you first time you've met them, and we do the usual. We ask questions about the other person. People ask questions of us. And someone says, like, tell me about yourself. The first things that we go to are the labels, the definitions, because that is, in all fairness, the easiest way for us to describe a succinct way or a succinct idea of who we are to the other person. So we might start with our job, for example. So I'll say, look, I'm a software engineer, or I'm a doctor, I'm a nurse, I'm a I don't know, barrister, whatever you do. So that's our first label of identity, what we do as a function of a job. And then we might say, well, I'm a parent. And that's another label. That's another tile in the mosaic that defines who we are, part of our identity. And then we may say, I like cars. I play video games. I do this at the weekend. I like cooking. I listen to podcasts. I do a lot of reading. This is my favorite author. All of these things, they go towards shaping this idea of who we are. And that enables us to translate this idea of self to the other person. When we dig down into that, and this is I want to ask you an interesting question, which I think I may have talked about in an article way back when. And that question is, if you took away all of the labels, if you didn't describe yourself by your profession or your likes or your roles as a human being in society and in family and what have you, if you took away those labels, how would you define yourself? What would you use to describe who you are and what your identity is? It's a really, really challenging question, and I don't expect anyone to have an answer to this right now. If you do have an answer, for the love of God, tell me, because I need to know how you've done this. I don't think I can give a decent answer to this question, to be fair. So I'm going to leave that as a little something for you to contemplate post-podcast, and please share your ideas and thoughts with me in the comments on the Substack. I would absolutely love to hear them. So on that note, if I take away the labels and I'm left completely dumbfounded as to how to describe the mosaic, because the mosaic's made up of all these little features, I might start to think about talking about me from a kind of emotional and philosophical sense, but again, it's labels. If I say that I'm compassionate, if I say that I'm generally pretty happy, if I say that I'm sort of fairly disciplined, I think, these are labels, again, that define the construct. But the actual identity itself, what is that? What is that behind the labels? It's really, really tricky. It's a deeply esoteric thing. And off the back of that notion, I want to dive into something a little bit that's gonna really throw your head in a spin, I imagine. But bear with me. So we're going to get a little esoteric, and I'm going to go into some Buddhist stuff because, if you've listened to the podcast before, you'll know that I am a Buddhist. I practice this a lot. I do a lot of meditating, and I do a lot of reading and studying of Buddhist literature. So in Buddhism, we have this idea called anatta or anatman, which actually suggests that there is no unchanging permanent self, that it's an illusion, that none of it is real. It's just the self, which we would refer to as like the ego, is an illusion. It doesn't exist. It's literally just a prison for the awareness. So in that case, like, what the hell is identity if the ego, the self, is illusory? Would we still exist? Well, of course we would, And this is where we talk about awareness versus self in Buddhism. We have the awareness, which is aware of the self, and the self, which is the identity. And it becomes very blurred a lot because our experience, our perceptual experience of the world is that the awareness and the self are the same thing. But in Buddhism, they feel like it. They feel like the same thing, and that's the trick of the self. So Buddhism says. But in Buddhism, the idea of meditating and practicing is to is to become the awareness and not the self. And the awareness is that little divine numinous thing, that's the bit that we're really interested in getting into. That's the awareness is the thing that exists in the present moment outside of identity and everything else. It literally is the experiencer of the now. So bearing that in mind, what Buddhism has given me around the nature of identity and my relationship with my nature of self, my identity, is not to take it too seriously. Because if we were to see it as just an illusory thing, as the comedian Bill Hicks said, we are the universe experiencing itself subjectively. I am no longer David attempting to understand the world. I am the universe attempting to understand David. But, whether you're into Buddhism and the idea of the self being illusion, or whether we just go back to the idea that identity is fluid, and that's something that we can all agree on. Identity still holds a function. Identity still has a purpose in reality. Our identity shapes how we're treated by society. It shapes how we navigate through the world. It shapes our relationships. It shapes our sense of belonging. Our identity will impact our mental health and our inner lives because of the way that we perceive the world, because of the way that we feel and experience things. So although we can say, yes, its identity is fluid and it's ever changing and it may be slightly ephemeral, it's still real because it has tangible consequences to our experiences in life. And it doesn't matter whether it's, we can put a label on it and say, yes, it definitely exists. It definitely doesn't. I am definitely rigidly this person. None of that matters, because so long as something has an impact on our experience, and bearing in mind that our experiences form and define our reality, then that makes identity as real as anything. In fact, it shapes the way that we perceive the real. So it forms a fundamentally important role in our experience and understanding of the world around us. On that note, I'm going to just circle back to my thoughts around identity and how I don't take it too seriously. And I think that's the important thing, is to recognize it for what it is. Yeah, we've all got ego. We've all got thoughts and ideas and desires and wants and needs and everything else. And they all come from the identity. But let's not take that too seriously. Let's have a little bit of fun with it. For me, it's the idea that identity is not a destination. It's a journey. It's an ever-changing tapestry of my own experiences. It's intricate. It's bewildering. It's madly fascinating. And it's a testament to our growth, to our changing, to our understanding ourselves better. It becomes an integral part of our self-awareness and our self-development, understanding the identity, understanding each of those tiles in the mosaic and where they come from and what they bring, and asking ourselves, does this tile in particular serve me in a positive way? Or is it causing me and others or others suffering? And I feel like this is the fundamental question. Does this aspect of my identity cause me or others suffering? And if it does, then that's something for us to work on and try and change. Maybe, let's pop that tile out and put a new one in there. Let's change it. Let's shift that image again. Let's change that identity. Because when we consider that the identity is not a rigid construct, it's not this sculpture that is unchanging or unchangeable, when we recognize that the identity is like a river and it is constantly changing, constantly flowing, and we have the agency and the power to impact change on that identity, then that gives us an incredible amount of power to change. We can recognize that we have control to an extent of the shaping of the landscape of our identity. And that's where the real self-development work comes in. That's where the real changes can happen, when we recognize that we are able to change that image, that picture of the identity of ourselves. We become, in a way, arbiters of our own fate, in the sense that we can change and adapt the identity to better serve us in the present moment, and to recognize that that is always going to change, and we can always make changes to it. It's a deeply empowering space in which to exist. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all I have to say on the subject of identity in this episode. As always, I hope there are some useful tools and ideas that you can take from this and apply to your own life, your own journey, and your own self-development. Thank you for spending some time with me today. I always appreciate it when people listen, and I always appreciate it when people ask questions and want to comment and find out some more information. So if you have questions or ideas or thoughts or anything on the content of this podcast, then please, you can drop a message on the Substack, which is at theobservingeye.substack.com. You can find me on TikTok, which is at theobservingeye, on Instagram at theobservingeye, and we're on Facebook as well, at The Observing Eye. Everywhere, all over those social places. You can come and find me, drop a comment, and I will get back to you ASAP. I do my best to read all messages that we get through. Wishing you all a wonderful weekend. I know it's Friday, this winter is coming. Halloween is next Tuesday, so looking forward to that. Get your crazy masks on. And I hope you have a fabulous, restful weekend, all of you. Much love, and I'll catch you soon.
You've been listening to The Observing Eye. Thanks for spending some time with me today. I hope that you found it useful. And if you're interested in any more of my writings or work around psychology and philosophy and general day-to-day living, please go and take a look at my Substack, which is theobservingeye.substack.com, and that's I as in the letter, not I as in the gelatinous organ through which you see. Take care, everybody. Much love, and I'll see you soon.